It's a really good piece of casting, not least because she is a terrific actor. And she has a very, very expressive face, which is that it's this kind of strange mixture of, on the one hand, quite angular features, on the other hand, these kind of, window to the soul eyes. And reminded me a little bit of that thing that Liza Minnelli has, which are about you are able to telegraph contradictory emotions with what looks like very little effort. I'm sure it's actually to do with being very precise about your skill. And of course, it is very important when you're doing Emma to be able to project a number of contradictory things at the same time. One of the first things to say about this Emma is that she's quite an unlikable Emma, as you said in the interview, and as indeed Anya Taylor-Joy said, when there was times when she found Emma very difficult. And there have been, so many versions of Emma, whether big screen or small screen, and quite often they have tended to soften the edges to make Emma more likable, because the moment that you referred to in that interview, in which they're on a picnic and she very casually but very cruelly says something to Miss Bates, badly done, Emma, as which is the line that Mr. Knightley uses. That moment in the novel, it is like a dagger, and it's kind of how well is the film working that when you get to that moment, everyone goes, and you're quite right. There is an almost audible intake of breath, because it's not just that Knightley realises that she's done something wrong. What you realise about the character is that cruelty is just below the surface, and it has to be there, otherwise the story doesn't make any sense. What's interesting is that actually surfaces within an adaptation of Emma in which comedy is very much to the fore. So the Autumn de Wilde version of Emma full stop, which is a kind of strange affectation.
Well, I mentioned at the beginning that I don't think Annie was interested in the full stop.
I'm not entirely sure what it does.
Maybe she didn't even know it was there.
I've read a lot of pieces of people saying it's like, Emma, and that's it. So it's the full stop version of it. Somebody else made a very good gag about it's a way of telling audiences that it's a period piece. Emma, period.
That's it.
Because that's another word for full stop.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I'm not entirely sure what the full stop denotes. But actually what this version does is it does play up the comedy. It is very funny. I did laugh pretty much all the way through it. I think that one of the effects of that is that sometimes you lose some of the intricacies of the novel. Although whenever you translate anything from novel to the screen, the screen version has to stand on its own, and we can't just all sit around all day comparing Jane Austen on the page and Jane Austen on the screen, because, as we know, they're two completely different beasts. But it is fascinating that, I think the best way of describing it is this: Emma, the source text, is like a Beatles song. You can play it in a number of different ways. You can play it fast, you can play it slow, you can play it upbeat, you can play it swing, you can play it skiffle, you can play it rock, but it's still the same song. And you can emphasize different melodies and different counter melodies, because the thing itself is so sturdily constructed that it will stand up to those. And watching this, I did think I've seen so many interpretations of it. And one of the things that this version tells me is that you can accentuate, play up those comedic elements, and yet the whole of the rest of the story is still intacto. It really helps that you have a brilliant cast. Incidentally, fabulously well-dressed cast. From the Bill Nighy character, who's dressed in a way that makes him look almost more like an animation.
How much did Bill Nighy enjoy his costume?
I know, that was just terrific. And these collars, these very, very high collars that make it look like everybody's head is being offered on a plate. These kind of really preposterously
it looked uncomfortable.
Which is great, because it kind of says something about the social strata that it's working in. I do think that Miss Bates, I think Miranda Hart performance is really good, because I think that moment in which you're going from comedic to pathos is really important. Mia Goth plays Harriet almost like a school child. Everything from the fact that, the saucer-wide eyes to, there's a couple of moments when she runs like she's a kid in the playground. It's a very, very physical performance. And also the way in which the music is used. I love live performance of music in films. And you mentioned the thing about the dance sequence. The dance sequence is the thing in which the film basically screams all the subtextual stuff that the dialogue hasn't told you. But there is a weird thing that once you've watched the dance, you go, oh, okay, now I can see where everything's going, in a way that you don't when you're reading the book, because the book is much, plays its hand much closer to its chest. But I do like that. I like the fact that they are actually playing and singing. I like the fact, Johnny Flynn, in terms, I had never imagined Mr. Knightley as having that level of animal magnetism before. And, you're introduced to the Knightley character in a way that is much more kind of like, whoa!
He takes his clothes off, is what you...
You've been introduced to him galloping along on a horse before he takes his clothes off.
Yes.
And I do think Johnny Flynn has a kind of real animal magnetism that is not something that is written into the DNA of the Knightley character as written by Austen. I think we should probably continue this after the news because I'm being played off like the Oscars.
We were just talking about Emma. Anya Taylor-Joy was on the programme, who plays Emma. And while it is definitely a showcase for a whole bunch of very young British actors, so as you mentioned, John, I think Johnny Flynn's 40. There's a lot of very good British talent on there. I did find...
no, Johnny Flynn's not 40. Knightley is. Knightley is meant to be 40, which is why I said that what happened when you... I don't know how old Johnny Flynn is, actually, but when you see Knightley as this incredibly strapping... And as I said, I mean, there is a decision made there to cast Johnny Flynn in that role, which does change the dynamic of Emma, because Knightley is this, he's a fanciable creature.
Well, do you think?
Yes, I do.
I'm not. But yes, obviously he has a fire within him.
Okay, well, I guarantee you that in the cinema, the scene very early on when
oh, sure. Well, I know, absolutely. Well, he disrobes with style.
Yeah, exactly. Perfectly put.
Shall we? Okay.
Disrobes with style.
Yes, I was. But the younger actors,
whilst being robed, that's the point, because he's being changed.
But I do think Miranda Hart and Bill Nye are very, very funny. It's the funniest I've seen Bill Nye for a long time.
Yeah,
and he doesn't have a lot, but what he does have, he makes the most of, and he looks absolutely fabulous.
But that thing about playing up the comedy, if I can just finish the thought that I was on before the news suddenly arrived, which I understand the news has to. We are a news and sports station. That. In emphasising that particular beat of the story, it shifts the centre of the story slightly in terms of the social satire. And so whilst I think that this version of Emma, it looks beautiful, it's beautifully designed, the production design is terrific, the costume design is fantastic, and I do think the use of music is very interesting, the way in which, individual instruments represent individual characters, the way in which you have that interplay between the operatic voice and the folk songs, the way in which performance of music is interwoven into the drama. I do think that there is also a slight sense of caricature, a slight sense of everything is a heightened reality. The colours are brighter, the stances are more, and Mia Goth is a very good example of this, that Mia Goth character of Harriet is played like in such a childish way, and obviously that there's an element of childishness in the source, but it's really, really played up. Josh O'Connor as Mr. Elton, who is just the insufferable divinity of the character that he plays. Everything is heightened and everything is pushed towards the level of caricature. So I really enjoyed it, and I think incidentally it's a real crowd pleaser. I mean, I saw it in a fairly full screening with critics, and I wasn't the only one laughing. And I'm pretty sure that with packed multiplex audiences, it will play well. It's just that thing, as I said. It's in the end what it comes down to is that an Austen novel is like a brilliantly written song. That's why I compare it to a Beatles song. Are you emphasising the drums or the guitar or the bass or the counter melody? But the song is still the song.